Hey, partners in crime, it's great to see you today. I am so excited to tell you that we have with us today Elena Taylor. Welcome, Elena.
Yay! Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
It's so good to have you, and we always love when you visit. Now, for anybody who maybe might not know Elena, which I doubt is anybody, she spent several years working in theater as a playwright, a director, a designer, and an educator before turning her storytelling skills to novels. Her first series, which we loved, was the Eddie Shoes Mysteries, written under the name of Elena Hartwell. And that was about a quirky mother daughter duo who made us laugh and solve crimes. It was wonderful. And then we got to hang out with her through her Sheriff Bet Rivers mysteries, which were a lot of fun. And I've heard a rumor that we're going to get another one soonish.
Yes, somewhere August, September of next year.
So
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah.
And today we're with her about her first standalone suspense book, The Haunting of Emily Grace.
Yay. Love that cover. I love that
It's
cover
the
so much.
best. So tell us a little bit about The Haunting of Emily Grace.
Oh, wow. So this book is, like you said, it's a departure for me. It's a standalone instead of being part of a series, and it's suspense instead of either private eye or police procedural. So it was really different to write because the rules are so different, especially like with a police procedural, your police officer, even if they don't follow the rules, they know what the rules are, right? You know what the rules are. We all know the world that they sort of inhabit and the things that they need to do. And with suspense, where it is not a professional solving a crime, it's a character in a situation that they're not sure what's happening. Maybe there's a crime, maybe there's not. Maybe they're in danger, maybe they're not. Maybe it's this, is the narrator even reliable? Like all the rules go out the window. And so I had this realization of, oh, wow, I can, kind of anything is fair game here. I don't have to justify her behavior in any kind of way. And so that was really fun. And then, it's all about creating atmosphere and environment and how the world that she's in impacts her. And it's not a locked room mystery, but it has some of those characteristics of, she's in this very isolated island and this very isolated house, and the house plays a role. And so that was really fun to explore. It is ultimately a book about grief and the grieving process, so that part is sort of hard and painful, but I like how I got to explore that theme in the context of like propelling readers through a story. Um, so yeah, it was an absolute delight to write, and I'm thrilled to have it out, and yeah. So that's where it came from.
It was such a different experience reading this
Yeah.
because you're right. There wasn't her tracking down stuff. It was her experiencing things.
Experiencing stuff, and then her how she dealt with it. So it
Yeah.
was instead of a police procedural where Sheriff Bet Rivers, there's a crime and she has to solve it and she has to follow the clues, and she's methodical, and with this it was like, oh my gosh, that happens. Was that real? Was that my imagination? Is that something otherworldly? Do I need to react? And so you can always keep, hopefully the reader, but certainly the characters, a little bit off balance, and nobody's telling the truth, and not necessarily in a bad way, but we don't tell everybody what's going on inside us, and so all of the characters are hiding things. And so that was sort of fun too, of when do I reveal or when do they reveal, and what can readers sort of figure out. And of course it's a little bit my homage to Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, for anybody who's read that, which was probably it's often considered sort of the earliest suspense, and a book that really stuck with me. Like I read it as a kid, and it just, yeah, right. I was sort of a precocious reader. I was probably like fourth grade. I'm reading Rebecca. But it really stuck with me. And that opening image I dreamt last night, I went to Mandalay, and this idea of the haunting of a place, of a location, that really has stayed with me. And so I got to play with all of those components in one book.
Oh, and the character of Emily Grace was so real.
I love
Um,
her. Thank
it
you.
yes, it's so crazy. Like, how did you tell us how you made Emily and what she's about.
Wow. Um, there's a lot of me in her, or a lot of her in me, however you want to think about that. So she's a character that it shares a lot of how she thinks is very similar to how I think.
Mhm.
Like I've never been obviously in her exact situation, but there are events that happen in the book that have happened to me. Her reactions are, so she feels very personal.
Mhm.
With Bet Rivers, Bet may be a lot like me, but I'm not a cop. I'm never going to be a cop. Like her sheriff, that whole world is very different to me. But with Emily Gray, I've been a carpenter. I know what that means. I've had, I've worked for people that are not exactly like Cameron, but there's more crossover. And then her internal life is very much stuff that I've grappled with. And so not an identical situation, but close enough that I could tap into my own emotional experiences. So part of her is, like personal. And so that I could fold in. But then it was also it's fun to create a character where you can give her things maybe you wish were true about you or would be fun if they were true about you, right? So it's like you, but better.
Me
And
2.0.
right, I know, right. It's like, oh, I wish I could, have that. And I'm a person who understands being a loner. Like that is a characteristic that I really understand. But I love that I give her people to turn to. And that idea of maybe you don't need a village, but you do need a house of people. You need three, right? Like you need a trio, right? Or you need And so I enjoyed her understanding the role other people could play in her life. Like that was really fun for me to explore. And so I think all of that is part of what makes her feel complex is because she's having to grapple with her personal life, her professional life, what's her place in the world? Where does she want to be? What does she want to do? And we've all been there, right? We have all been in that place. And so she's younger than I am, but maybe where I was at her age in some way. And so I think all of those things add to making her a complex character, but that we can relate with. Because even if we haven't experienced what she's experienced, we've experienced something similar enough it resonates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like she was totally destroyed and she was building herself back from
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Because
Um,
she's resilient.
yeah.
She's resilient in the face of tragedy. And I think, most of us who have gotten to a certain age, we've all faced something, right? Most people are not so charmed to have escaped unscathed. And so I always think, it's what we do with our life experiences that show who we are. Do we stand back up again? How hard are we going to fight? What are we willing to endure?
But yeah, she definitely showed a lot of that through the book, and her growth and change
Yeah.
was deciding what
Yeah.
she wanted to be and who she
Yeah.
wanted to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I have to tell you, I loved all of the tidbits that you shared about the house and the carpentry. And you
Yeah.
just mentioned you were a carpenter. Can you
I
tell us a
was.
little bit about that? And like, did you have
Well,
to do research? And
yeah, yeah, yes and no. So, my first foray into carpentry was my mom and dad built their own home. And my parents were not carpenters. Like my father I loved my father, but his carpentry skills were a little questionable. But they built a house, and it was a crazy house. It was on poles, it was off the ground. I mean, it was just an insane house, and they built it. And so, as a little kid, I mean, we're talking 4 years old, 5 years old, they would be like putting flooring in, and my dad would start a row of nails, and I would go along behind him and finish putting the nails in the floor. So here I am, 4 or 5 years old, and I'm learning how to use tools. Not from a great teacher, mind you, but someone who was really willing to let me sort of dig in and learn how to do that. So I started using tools and was very comfortable at a very young age. And then I was an auto mechanic when I was 17, 18. I dropped out of high school. I was an auto mechanic. And so I'm very comfortable with tools, mechanical. I
yeah,
could look at something and be like, I might not be able to fix it, but I can tell you how to. Like, you know what I mean? Like I
Right.
have all those kind of skills. And then when I started working in the theater in my 20s, I went back to college and I was working in the theater and I did a ton of carpentry. I was a stage carpenter, I was a technical director. I built props, I built furniture, I built sets. And so, my joke about my carpentry skills is everything only has to last 6 weeks, right? It's like you
Right.
build it, show happens, comes back
Just
down.
don't kill anybody.
So I do have a friend who is a much better carpenter than I am, and I did run a couple things past him, but it was
Mhm.
more like checking. Like I've never actually built a house, and so I had some questions about some of that stuff, like how long it would take, for her to do all the finished carpentry in this giant house. So some of those questions like that, I ran that past someone that I know, but I had a strong enough, like sailing. I've sailed enough that I knew what I needed to check. When it came to like the sailboat, which incidentally, the Choi Lee in the book is one of my all-time favorite boats. They're just absolutely stunningly beautiful. So it's always fun when you know enough to know what you need to ask. Because sometimes as writers, we make mistakes because we don't even know enough to know what we don't know. So having just enough experience, I sort of was like, okay, this is something I need to double check. This is something I'm confident about. Here, here's my experts. So, in terms of building the house, it could be built. All of the construction stuff is real.
Yeah.
The house obviously is an invention in my mind, but I think it would be an amazing house. Like I want somebody to build that house.
Yeah, I mean, I was like sketching it out in my head, like and the water lines and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
electricity and how they
Yeah.
had this pulled together and the
Yeah.
bridge to get to the island, and
Yeah.
it was crazy. Yes, I
Yeah.
couldn't like stop thinking about like I really need a pen and a paper.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool. But they're on like they're even cut off in this house from the main
Yeah.
part of the island.
Yeah.
So and stuff happened there in the past, and there's some myths. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Building the history of my island.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like this culmination or combination of all these places that I've visited or read out or been to or what have you. And so the island, Salish Island is not real, but the island chain is very real. So the San Juan Islands start just outside Seattle and go north into Canada. And there's hundreds of some of them are so small at high tide they're underwater. And then some are so large they have more than one town. Like they really vary in size. And you can access all of them with a ferry system or private boats. Some islands don't have actual ferries. That's real. People have islands where they have to sail over or have a float plane or whatever to get to. And so all of that is real in these islands. And Vancouver Island is actually part of that chain. A lot of people know Vancouver Island, may not realize that Whidbey Island and Vancouver Island. Those are all part of the San Juan Island chain. And so all of that is very genuine and very real. And then I loved that. So there's this, she goes out to this small island, right, where there's a town, a little town community. And then at the far north end, there's a narrow bridge that's, can be underwater when the tide is up that goes to an even smaller island that he owns privately. And what I loved about that, it's a little bit the Woman in Black. For those of you who've read The Woman in Black, right? There it's an homage to sort of a lot of different sort of suspense that I've read, but this idea of the ground underneath us can shift, right? That we can't even necessarily trust. That the Brit you feel like you have this road to safety, and the reality is that can be taken away, because I think part of what I'm playing with is that everything can be taken from you. Nothing is ever fully safe, right? I had a friend who was going to go back to grad school, and he reached out to me because I had been to grad school, and what do you think? And I said, look, Keith, I said, the only thing that can't be taken from you is your education. Everything else in your life can go. Partners, homes, jobs, all of that can be taken. Your education can, and that's part of its value. And so I'm playing with also this idea of we can get into these states where we go, my life is what it is, and that's safe. And the answer is no, it's not. It's not. And so this idea that, the history of the island are people who thought they were safe and they weren't. And the history of the where he was is, people who thought they were safe and they weren't. And he thinks his money protects him and it doesn't. Like, and so I was playing in part with creating the history of this island, which I wish I could visit. Like I would so live there. But that I was playing around with that idea that our sense of security is a false one, that we really only have ourselves and our reactions to events. And so that's layered into the history of that island. It was a lot of fun to create the history of that island. I enjoyed that a lot.
Oh, it was crazy. And it seemed so real. It was shocking to me to know that it was.
Yes. I love that. See, I love that. I did my job.
And speaking of the ground underneath your feet moving, I had never heard of the breathing
That is
grounds.
also real. Now, I obviously invented the name. And did I have I ever sent you the video? I'll send you the video. There's
No.
some video of it. So there that is a real event. I'm not going to give away what it is or how it happens, but I'll send you the video. And I had seen it years ago. And in my head I thought I could build something out of that. And in fact, The Breathing Grounds was the original title of the book. Um, and this idea, again, what we were just talking about, that the very ground underneath us can be infirm, right? That the ground underneath us can move, and it does. And I saw that video and it just stayed with me. And that was how I started to develop the location for this story long before I knew what the story was
Mhm.
about. I just had that in my head where I kept coming back to that video. So I'm going to send you the video. It's super cool.
Oh,
It's super, super cool.
I can't
The
wait to
ground,
see that.
the
That's so
ground
cool.
is, yeah, yeah.
It actually, when I was reading it, it was putting me in mind of the Lord of the Rings in that movie where the trees are moving and the whole
Yes, the
ground and that.
Ents.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like,
That the idea that trees can,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh. Now, you live not too far from the setting of this book. So, how much research did you need to do to pull this together? I mean, because some of it
Yes.
sounds.
Yeah, most of it was stuff that I already know. So, I used to I'm now living in Spokane, which is about a 4.5 hour drive to Seattle. So I'm now on the far eastern side of the state. But I lived in the Seattle area for a very long time, and I spent a lot of time in the area where my island is set. Including, like, I did a show out on Orcas Island, and I stayed out there for like a week and a half doing, it was like a workshop production. And so I stayed in a house on the beach and, on one of the islands, and vacationed there a lot. And my husband and I used to spend a lot of time in La Conner area, which is the mainland side of where all these islands are. And so it's an environment that's very familiar to me. I know that environment really well. So there was very little I had to do in terms of research. I've traveled on the ferries, throughout those islands. And so I know that geography really, really well. So that was very little research. That was all personal experience. And it's a beautiful, beautiful area. Beautiful area. Yeah.
Yeah, I could absolutely picture it, but it made me want to visit even more,
Yeah, yeah,
very much.
yeah, yeah. It is. It's beautiful all times of the year. Like, I've been there when the storms are hitting. I was out one year, was out on one of the islands for Thanksgiving, and it snowed. And like, it snowed on us, and then it snowed while we were on the ferry. And it's just sort
Oh,
of, kind of magical. I mean, stunningly beautiful in the summertime, but the winter and the storms and stuff are pretty great too. So yeah, no bad times would
scary,
be.
scary and wonderful.
Yes, exactly.
Now, you mentioned a couple times in the book, and actually while we were talking about things coming in threes, and that's something that my family's always talked about, good and bad. So, can you tell us a little bit about that and
Yeah.
why it's important?
It really is, and it plays out in so many ways. The triangle is the strongest geometrical shape, right? Like, and things are funny in threes because two is not a pattern and four is too much.
Yeah.
That's why a joke works when something is repeated for the third time. It's not funny the first time, it's not funny the second time, but the third time you see the pattern, that's what makes it funny. Fourth is one step too far. So three is always what matters. And there's a there's a saying about if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you go with a group. And I think the perfect is the trio, right? So it's not alone, right? You're not going to go as fast, but you're not with a group, so you're not slowed down. So like, a trio is sort of ideal in a lot of ways. It diffuses any duo, right? So you've got Cameron and and Chloe and um um Emily Grace. Yeah, Elena, get the word out. Emily Grace, in the house together. And it's it's sort of perfect because it's both diffuses, but it also creates greater problems because now you don't know who's aligned with who. So it's an exponential complication to go from a duo to a trio. And so that this idea of things in three, I don't think a series is a series until the third book is out,
Yeah.
right? Like the having the third Bet Rivers book come out is like, okay, now it's a series. There's three books. And so I think that number sort of plays out. I mean, it plays out in mathematics in important ways, it plays out in music in important ways, it plays out in everything. So I think that's, and too many I like the conciseness of characters in this book.
Yes.
Carter Wilson talks about how having fewer characters just allows such greater depth. Like he's a big fan of that, of a small cast of characters, and I feel that way too. And I think because of my theater background, on stage, yeah, if you've got $1 million, you can do a cast of 40 people, but most theater is five characters or less, and I sort of that has carried over into my novels, that my I don't have a cast of thousands because it's like every character is an actor you have to hire to put on stage, and so I tend to think it's sort of these smaller groups.
Well, and she has two girlfriends that she meets on the
Yeah,
island, and
and they become a
that's,
trio.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so it's just another asset of that.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just wonderful.
Thank you, thank you.
Now, you talk a little bit about the difference between superstition and phenomena,
Yeah,
and that's a big deal.
yeah,
Um, so, can you share a little bit about what that difference is?
yeah,
Maybe not so much
yeah.
why it's important.
Yeah, it's something that I find so fascinating is, is this difference between there is phenomena like what I talk about in the breathing grounds, which is
Mhm.
real and happens, right? It is a scientific event. And a superstition for me is something that human beings have created out of a need to find order in the chaos of living. And so there's this wonderful thing that happens where in scientific phenomenon, human beings layer story on top of that, right? They have to put a story on top of it to understand the science or to understand the world. And so this idea of what do we rely on, right? On the one hand, we shouldn't rely on superstition. We need to rely on tangible, scientifically proved phenomena. But that's not exactly true, right? Because human beings by nature are storytellers. We come into the world with a real grasp of once upon a time. We immediately, all right, good, tell me the story. We tell stories, everything from patterns in the sky that we create mythologies about to, what it means when fall comes, right? To, all of our experiences are understood through story. And so we can't discount that when we create stories about real phenomenon, we're tapping into something. We're tapping into a community understanding of something or because the reality is, oh, no one's supposed to be here. Well, maybe no one is supposed to be there. And it may not be a um unreal phenomenon. It may be a very real phenomenon, but there's a truth to the fact that people don't belong in certain places. And it's our narratives that may be fictionalized, but they're built on very real things. And so they're like, it's like the Venn diagram, right? Here's mythology and superstition, and here's real phenomena. And where they cross, there's this is real in both ways, and that the narrative is explaining to us something that's true about the natural phenomenon. I don't know if that was your question, but
Absolutely.
good.
Now, when Emily Grace goes to town, she meets someone who is, part of the superstition in the coffee shop.
Yeah.
And what really resonated with me there is actually the gluten-free cherry tart.
I wanted to eat everything in this book. I was like, I want that coffee shop in my neighborhood
What a
so
recipe.
bad. I'm like, so delicious. And I actually I made stuff that
Yeah,
for that particular thing, and it was delicious. So
you
I
need to
can't tell you,
share.
I don't even know what the recipe, like I was just like, let's try this, we'll mix this in. And I was like, yeah, they look like cow plops and they are incredibly delicious. Chocolate and dark cherries, and it was like,
Oh, I think I remember seeing that on your Instagram page. I'm going to look at
yeah,
reading it and I'm like, I want this recipe.
I
That
know.
was all I could think about for
Oh,
days.
I know. Oh, I know. Oh, I know. And I swear I can tell you exactly what the coffee tastes like there. Like it's like, yeah.
Yeah, you really have a knack for making that stuff go deep. And especially things like that, like thinking about the coffee, thinking about the friendships and the relationships and the fear. Um, and the fear of wondering if she's going crazy.
Yeah. 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 And having things that happen, I'm not going to give it away, but there is an event that happens in the book at Juniper's that is almost verbatim an experience that I had. And so, yeah, you and I can talk off camera. Um, and so, even those things which may feel invented are really grounded in personal experience. And so, it was, yeah, yeah, fun to write.
It was amazing and it was an experience. It really was. I
Yay.
enjoyed every minute. So thank you so
Yay.
much for sharing it
Yeah.
with us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And before we get off today, I need to hear more about Bet.
The next bet. I'm so excited.
Yes.
So excited. I love being back in Bet's world. She is, as a sheriff, of course, she is so much more tied to certain procedures and so there's a different set of rules, but it's really fun to be back in her world. So I have sent the first draft to my editor. It's coming out with Severn House, who published Haunting of Emily Grace and Cool Cool World, and I just love them. They're a great house, and I'm really enjoying being with them. And so, end of this month, I'll have a sense of how much work I have to do. It's fun. So it's the third book in the series, and so she's sort of established in her life, and so I'm throwing some more personal stuff at her this time around. Because she's kind of established now as the sheriff in this little community, but I'm gonna kind of mess with her personal life a little bit, so we'll see how that goes. Um and the first one is set in the fall, and the second book is set in the winter in severe weather conditions. And I set this one is in the summer, and I'm pushing it further over to we live in fire season out here in my community, and that's a big danger. And so I'm sort of pushing her into the extremes of summer, which I realized only partway through the draft. I'm like, oh, Elena, this isn't a mild summer. You had a big winter, give her a tough summer. So I'm sort of propping that part of the book up as well. So the environment's going to play a role in this one too.
And you've done that in the last two books. It's been its own character.
Yeah, and I think it's partly because I'm so out in the world, with my equines, having the horses and everything, and my giant mule. So my equines, I'm out in it, and I'm very conscious of like, okay, it's muddy, so it's slippery. Can they go out today? Okay, the ground is hard, so it's safe. Okay, the fire danger is here. I don't want to be too far. I have my trailer if I need to get them out. Like I'm very conscious because of them, and I'm outside off and on all day, whatever, doing chores or spending time with them. And so the environment, I'm not a farmer, but it's very similar relationship into like how the environment impacts my daily life. It's like
Okay.
the weather's really great. The guys can go out early, or the weather's going to be bad this afternoon. I'm always looking at the weather radar, going, okay, I think I'll bring the guys in at 3 instead of 5 because the storm's coming in. Whatever. And so the environment plays such a huge role for me. And owning horses, I have come to really respect how farmers are so impacted. My hay guy, I was going to have hay delivered this week, and he's like, oh, the storms have created a problem. I'm going to come next week. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's a different way to think than going to the grocery store and, picking up something in a package and not wondering how the weather is impacted. Even if eggs are now $12 a dozen or whatever,
Right.
right? But there's reasons for that. So it has definitely I'm getting more and more invested with each book that I write and how the environment plays a role.
Well, and you mentioned Severn House, and can I just say their covers rock. Your book covers are amazing.
I love my covers, and Piers, the designer, their in-house designer, is celebrating his 25th year. He's just incredible.
It's
This
amazing.
cover just knocked my socks off. It's so beautiful. And, everybody across the board, no matter what they think of the book, they love the cover.
Well,
I'm like,
and it's
great.
such a like I looked at it like online and I've been looking at it for months, but holding it is
Yeah,
just like
it is.
I love this
Yeah,
cover.
I do
It's
too. I do
amazing.
too. It's everything I wanted. It's everything I wanted for the cover, and better than anything I could have imagined. So
Yeah, he just knocks it out of the park.
he
So
really does. Yep. Yep.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so I guess we're done for
I
today.
could chat with you all day long.
So I guess we will see each other soonish, but we'll be back on for the next Sheriff Bet Rivers book
I love it.
in
I
summer-ish.
love it. I love it. Best
Even though
tours
we're
ever.
skipping spring.
I know. I know. I was like, oh, she didn't get a spring book. Well, I could only kill so many people in a small rural town. So,
I guess
there's that. There's that. I have to move her forward in time.
she'll have to go to a conference or something.
I had that thought. I was like, does she travel, or do I make the book 2 years down the road? And that might be, if I do, knock on wood, I do a fourth. I'm like, it may be just she's further down, because I don't want to get into the Jessica Fletcher, Cabot
Yeah.
Cove, 300 people die in Cabot Cove, Maine. No, right? I can't go there. So
Only
I'll keep it
250
low.
residents.
Everybody, it's like mass casualties.
All right. Well, everybody check out Elena's new book, The Haunting of Emily Grace, and her backlist because it is a lot of fun. And we will see you